We continue our look at Pizarro, and this is this critical moment when, with the 8th Impressionist exhibition, he actually brings in Seurat and Paul Signac, and they're painting in a different style. If you're not familiar with their work, Seurat would be most famously known as the pointillist, and again, this is a scientific study, as much of anything, of how color affects things. And with Paul Signac, we even go even farther out, borderlining in pure impressionism. But the simplest solution, the easiest way to kind of explain this visually, is that the brushstrokes become almost more like dots rather than these long kind of lengthy things. And what's really interesting about Pizarro is even at this kind of later point in his career, he kind of goes after this style. So we have this entire period with Pizarro that he's painting in this neo-impressionist style, very much like we're seeing here, where again, pointillism is one of the terms that we often use, where it is really kind of developed through the system of dots and larger patches in the case of Pizarro. And the idea is that our mind's eye, when we stare at this, kind of forms everything together in order to form the image. And again, a lot of this is just kind of comparing, if you will, kind of the scientific study of how they believed the eye perceived color and the relationship thereof. Again, when we look at Peasant Girls from 1888, we are reminded that he is still kind of pursuing this peasant subject matter, but you'll notice, and this was kind of apparent at the end of the last lecture, they really do become more of the focus here, and they start to engulf the entire landscape and really be the focus rather than being this part of the landscape as we're kind of used to seeing in the tradition of European landscapes. But again, when we look at these images, all of these are kind of done with this pointillist sensibility. Apple picking from 1886 is a great example of this. If we look at the shadow, created this huge rectangle that kind of forms over where we have this triangular part of it leading us to the right corner of the apple tree. If we really kind of focus in on the shadow itself, what we'll see is it's really just a series of dots, and this is one of the areas the Impressionists very much investigated, was what really does come with the composure of shadows. Is it just this dark gray, or is it actually all of these different colors that you can kind of put together? So again, Pizarro is working in this newer style. Here's another example, similar title. This is from the Dallas Museum of Art from 1888. Again, apple picking. When we look at this, we can see these rows in the background, really just fields of these tiny, tiny little dots. And really, if we think about this, this is not an easy way to paint. It's very, very time-consuming, and you have to have a tremendous amount of patience and to really do this correctly. And a lot of this, you have to have this focus and almost this analytical way of looking at what you're trying to paint and studying it. And I imagine you spend as much time thinking about what you're going to be painting as much as you're painting. Here's a very nice close-up of the painting we were just looking at, and you can really start to see his effect of using these dots, even in the case of making them, some of them, into the apples, as we see all the way over there on the far left. But again, this really, really wonderful use of color, and this is really what it all kind of goes back to at the end of the day, is the use of color itself. But when we're looking at the neo-impressionists kind of leading forward, a lot of this is the use of complementary colors. Again, this idea that when you look at the color wheel, the color directly across from whatever color you have is going to bring about a highlight. And this is certainly what we see from Seurat's work, leading into what we see with Pizarro as well. Woman with a Green Scarf is just another example of this painting technique, and very, very wonderful background in my opinion. It's very hard to see if this would actually be some type of wallpaper or something like that. One would expect to see this wonderful flat white wall, but instead Pizarro has put in these wonderful splotches of red, almost making it feel like a field of flowers rather than staring at a blank wall in the background. The woman's facing forward us, and of course we have this green very much as a focus. Hay Harvest from 1901, kind of continuing in this tradition, but as we see, as we kind of move along here, we are starting to revert back to larger brushstrokes, and this is very simply a matter of Pizarro kind of got tired of working in this impressionistic or the neo-impressionistic style, and a lot of his work, as we kind of continue, he slowly starts to kind of work his way out of it, and in the end, I think he just kind of got tired of the obsessive compulsive dot making that comes into creating it. And a lot of it, you probably lose a lot of the joy, if you will, of having these larger brushstrokes and really getting into the painting in a different capacity rather than analyzing it. And as we continue here and we see this wonderful port painting from 1896, we can see where we're definitely moving out of what we think of as the neo-impressionist style. And we're very much kind of just moving back into the style that we associate with Pizarro, this impressionistic style. What's interesting about this painting is the perspective that we're at. Obviously, we're in some type of building and we're actually looking down. And again, we need to remember these multi-story balconies is something that we definitely see a lot of, and we'll return to this conversation in a second. After we look at this kind of offshoot painting from 1903, I just love the texture on this and how he's used the texture to kind of create these waves, and the way he's really simplified this mass of people leading to the boat into these tiny, tiny little dots. Even if he's moved away from the neo-impressionist style, I imagine he decided to use it in the favor of creating this throng of people that from this distance almost look like non-people, almost insects or that type of thing. But again, when we look at this and we see kind of the later movement towards the end of the career, something that is important to remember is that he is getting older and he has various ailments. So he does actually go through this entire series of paintings where the perspective is that of a balcony, and it is documented, if you will, that he actually had a hotel room, and what he would do is essentially sit in the hotel room and look out the window down onto the street itself and paint the composition from that perspective. But what we get from this period, not only do we have this angle kind of going down that we have from the other Impressionists as well, this is really when we start to see this almost Monet-esque series that we have of the same kind of subject matter from different perspectives. The Boulevard of Montmartre, again, we're going to look at many different views of this painting, and if we look at this, it really is almost the same view from every single painting, but what dramatically changes between each of them is the color usage and how he's using the perspective of the daytime versus the morning, and then the dusk of the day as well, to really create a different atmosphere and create a different palette in terms of color. We have this perspective over on the left of almost being white as our dominant tone, and then we go to this wonderful painting on the left, or excuse me, on the right, where he's actually painting the night sky, and it's wonderful because we can see the brushstrokes that he's using in order to create this sky, and it has this perspective of leading off into the distance by way of those brushstrokes, in addition to those long orthogonals that he's doing, creating a vanishing point slightly to the left of the center. And we have that wonderful street lamp that was hardly noticeable in the other images, but here is this bright, bright piece of light. I leave our discussion here with two portraits, self-portraits done towards the very, very end of his life. And again, when we look at this, the one on the right from 1903, one of the very last paintings he did, and again, very much a culmination of all of his understanding of painting and painting technique. Again, it's amazing, this man's life, when we look at the very, very early times that he had in St. Thomas in Venezuela, his early realism into Impressionism, and then going all the way as far as Neo-Impressionism, and then working his way back